your name, your position, and which award that you're on in the chat. And while you're doing that, you can also add your favorite thing about working on momentum. So let us know your name, your title, your award, and your favorite thing about working on momentum. We'd love to get to know you a little bit in the chat. So our session today is essentially broken down into three main sections. We have a slide presentation where we'll go over the typical types of sessions that you would apply to at a conference. We'll also talk about the typical sections of an abstract and give some tips about what to write for each of those sections. Then we're going to have a short interactive review of a past successful abstract submitted by one of the Momentum Awards. And then we're going to have a really nice opportunity for you all to start writing. So you'll have about 20 minutes to start writing an abstract, put some ideas onto paper, and don't worry if you haven't prepared. All you need to know is some activity that you're working on, and you can use that as your practice experience. So please, we do encourage you to stay for that writing portion, and then what will happen after you have a chance to write is that you'll be in a small breakout room and have the opportunity to talk through your experience with a facilitator and with some of your peers. And then we'll do a quick closing at the end. So that's kind of the structure for our session today. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dhratu, to get us started today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Reshma. Good morning, everyone. Many of the major conferences have led sessions on writing conference abstracts. The information and tips you will see in this presentation have been drawn and adapted from some of those sessions, notably one that were held in association with the International Conference on Family Planning and the International Social and Behavior Change Communication Summit. Some tips also come from a previous Momentum training on compelling presentation, which was held on October 4th, 2022. The material for that presentation can be found on the Hub, and we'll put the chat in the link. You can find link to all of these resources in the first slides. What is an abstract? It is essentially a short overview of your programmatic or research work that you want to present at an academic conference. By short, we mean that word count limits typically range from 200 to 500 words. When preparing an abstract, you are writing for two audiences. However, the primary audience is the review committee, and your goal is for them to select your abstract for presentation at the conference. So, as with any communication piece, it is important to know your audience and speak to them. You won't know exactly who is on the review committee, but consider what type of people they're likely to be. Implementers, researchers, maybe founders. You want to consider what they likely already know, care about, and need to know to make decisions. The secondary audience is the conference attendees. Research the conference, its focus area, and the typical attendee profile. The information will help you tailor your language and highlight the aspect of your research that will resonate most with the audience. Abstracts are usually published in conference programs and are what attendees look at to decide which session to attend. So keep in mind what would draw their attention as well. Requirements for abstract vary depending on the specific conference. However, there are some general guidelines that we'll talk about in this presentation. Conferences usually have a variety of session types. On the slide, you can see a list of the most common session types that you may encounter at a conference. Be sure to review the format and goal of each type of session and carefully consider which one makes the most sense for the information you are trying to convey. Your abstract will likely score better with reviewers if the content you're proposing is a good fit for the session type. As you write your abstract, consider what type of session you will use to deliver your remarks. The most common type of conference session is the individual session. These session types involve a single speaker or presenter delivering content on a specific topic. The two main types of individual sessions are the oral presentation and the poster presentation. Usually when you apply for an individual session, if you are accepted, the conference organizer would assign you to either do an individual presentation or a poster presentation. You won't have a choice. You usually apply for this type of session when you have a lot of findings or insight to share about a program activity, a study, or your work. An oral presentation is the most common format for sharing research findings, projects, or insight at conferences. If you are accepted for this type of session, you'll typically be assigned to a thematic session with 2 to 4 other presenters, and a moderator will guide the session, moderate the Q&A, and help find common thread across the presentations. With this type of session, it would just be you delivering your talk to an audience of conference goers who choose to attend your session. You'll be considered an expert in the field and expected to communicate your research or idea effectively. Within the broader session, you'll be given a specific amount of time to deliver your oral presentation, typically 10 to 20 minutes, with 3 to 5 minutes allocated to Q&A. You'll most likely use a visual aid such as a PowerPoint presentation to enhance your talk. If you are presenting on behalf of your Momentum Award, you can use the Momentum PowerPoint template. As you begin preparing your slide, you also want to look at our previous training on compelling presentation for tips on how to plan, design, and deliver your presentation. It is important that you follow the conference guidelines and submit your final presentation by the due date so that the correct version of your presentation will be loaded in time for your session. Another common format for disseminating research finding at a conference is through large poster presentation. Before designing your poster, make sure to check the conference organizer poster size requirements. Most posters include key sections like title, introduction, methodology or programmatic approach, result or program insight. It also includes either a discussion, an implication section, or a conclusion. In the actual poster, you'll be elaborating on those sections with more detail. Since posters are usually displayed together in a large exhibit hall and people are walking by, you want to be sure to make it visually appealing. For example, with colorful graphs, maps, or photo so that it catches people's attention. On that note, when you're standing there, you want to make eye contact with people and make them feel comfortable and interested to stop and engage with you. Since you'll be standing near your poster at designated times, people may view it at times you're not there. You may want to consider leaving your business card or a fact sheet nearby so people can take them and contact you later if they have any question or opportunity for collaboration. Note that we now have 2 Momentum poster templates that you can use as a starting point when preparing a poster. Also, it's important to note that electronic posters are now being used at conferences. You feel free to ask your comms team for help designing it. You're muted.
Thank you. The next category of conference sessions are pre-formed panel sessions. Some conferences solicit submissions for a pre-formed panel that address a specific theme. In such case, they're usually looking for a panel made up of people from a range of organizations, countries, and backgrounds who can offer varied perspectives and experiences related to the same topic or theme. Such panels are meant to be thought-provoking and promote dialogue and discussion. It's important that these panels are collaboratively designed and cohesive in telling a story from different angles, not just patching together multiple disjointed individual presentations. The abstract will need to be clear on how the story of the different panelists will be woven together to make a compelling whole. Momentum, as you all know, is unique in that we have a shared identity, but are made up of many different projects and organizations with staff from around the world. So while organizers may not like to see that all presenters for a panel are Momentum staff, there is a case to be made for us. Another way to organize a preform panel, such as a Momentum panel, is to do a satellite side event or a satellite session. The example in the photo here is from the Health Systems Research Conference in 2022 and involved speakers from 4 different Momentum Awards. A side event or satellite session is a 2 to 4 hour event that occurs concurrently and in association with the conference. Sometimes you can apply for a side event that are considered part of a conference and published in the event program. For this type of session, you'll need to submit an abstract by the designated deadline. And just a reminder, sometimes these deadlines are different for individual sessions versus side events. A side event at a satellite session, on the other hand, gives you an opportunity to engage an array of stakeholders who are attending the conference with you. It provides a forum for thought leadership, rolling out new tools or resources, moving a body of work forward, and many more different opportunities. The sessions can be open or closed invitation, so that's something to keep in mind. Some conferences have an option for a shorter comm talk or a lightened talk that is structured more like a TED Talk, if you all are familiar with this. This type of session may provide an opportunity to share key insights or a story in 5 to 10 minute intervals. This is something you'd apply for when you have an exciting idea, concept, experience, or a story to present that you're really keen to rally some attention around. Since there's not a lot of time, you won't have the opportunity to share a lot of details on methods or findings. So this type of session is not really meant for that. It's different from a standard abstract panel session. Many conferences welcome abstracts for capacity strengthening sessions, where attendees can learn new skills or improve their existing ones. These sessions provide participants with an opportunity to develop skills or strengthen their existing ones. The specific skills can vary, but should be responsive to a commonly voiced need in your field or community. For example, recently, skills in complexity-aware monitoring or adaptive learning have been really highly valued. It can also be useful to help people learn how to use specific tools or software during this type of session. For these sessions, your abstract should clearly explain the objectives and expected outcomes, specifically stating what knowledge or skills people will be able to apply to their work after leaving your session. The final category here, which we will note, it can be uncommon, is a multimedia showcase session. This type of session includes an interactive presentation that uses various forms of multimedia to convey information or showcase research. Multimedia showcases are not an option at all conferences, but when they are, they can be truly engaging and innovative. A key characteristic associated with multimedia showcase sessions are located in this slide. Since multimedia resources can be expensive and time-consuming, applying for these sessions will take a lot of work and will probably include you already having a collection of multimedia resources that can be showcased. Next, we'll move on to breaking it down, which are the typical sections of an abstract. Note that the way that we've described the following sections here are structured to primarily focus on individual sessions rather than a collaborative group session or the ones that we mentioned before.
As you plan to write your abstract, keep in mind some of the key characteristics of a strong abstract. A strong abstract is a concise, powerful summary or sales pitch of your work. It clearly demonstrates alignment with conference themes and tracks. It highlights something new, unique, or innovative. A strong abstract describes compelling data and results. It showcases strong impact or potential for impact on outcomes or for the way things are done. It explains why this work is important for the field. A strong abstract also includes realistic and sound conclusions. It demonstrates potential for strong audience interest and engagement. What you don't want to do is to exhaustively list all findings or details about your work. The items listed on this slide are the typical component of an abstract. You see different terms because different conferences call for different format. And sometimes the wording varies based on whether you are sharing research findings versus programmatic findings. In the slide that follow, we'll break down each of these sections with a few tips to share. The title. Your title is your headline and should describe the abstract content in a compelling way. The title should grab the reviewer's attention and conference attendees' attentions as well. The following tips will help you draft a compelling title. The title is often the first thing reviewer will see. So while it might be tempting to hurry through this component, don't let time focusing on other sections come at the expense of this one. Use descriptive terms that reflect the specificity of the content and context. It is often easier to produce a title after you at least have a first draft of the abstract, since you'll then have a clear sense of the content and the story you're trying to convey. Introduction and background. Often you have 2 to 4 sentences to introduce your abstract. Focus on describing key contextual elements such as how the intervention or the research you are describing fits within the broader context of the field. This can include high-level details about your setting, such as describing that the research happened in a rural district in Ghana, and the population that you work with, whether you work with adolescent girls or with a senior citizen group. The following tips will help you draft a compelling introduction and background. Don't waste space on general background information like global statistics. Dive right into the most relevant angle and information for the work you are sharing. Importantly, make sure it is clear why your activity or research is important to the field and how it aligns with what is already known. It is providing further evidence on something that is known. Is it pointing to something different that has been experienced elsewhere? Or does it illustrate a new way to tackle a particular issue?
Thank you, Drawtu. Sorry about that. Next, we'll move on to the methods or programs section of an abstract. This is really your chance to describe what you did and the approach that you took in your work. You will need to do this at a high level, but include enough details so that your methods are clearly stated. The information you provide may differ depending on whether you're describing research or an intervention or even a program. For example, in research, you may want to include that you conducted a survey among 700 adolescents in a rural district in Ghana to address their views on family planning services. This information is enough to give an idea of your work, but you won't have the space to give a lot of details about the survey instrument, how it was developed, what was included, how the sampling was done. It's tempting to get into those details, but you'll need to focus on the most essential information that you have. On the other hand, if you're submitting an abstract on programs, you'll want to describe the mechanics of that program and how and where it was implemented. For example, we pilot tested a provider checklist among nurses at 3 urban hospitals in Nigeria. For research and program abstracts, so this is both of the ones that we discussed, you'll want to include details on geographic location, the specific setting, and the populations that were involved. Now moving on, this is really the main section where you'll share your results and the key research findings or the program insights that you have. Here, you'll focus on the new and most compelling information your study or program provides. Speak to the improvements in health outcomes or changes in healthcare quality. Here, you'll speak to learnings about how to better implement programs as well. Some tips that we've noted are, for research, focus on quantitative or qualitative results related to your main research questions. An example in this case can be healthcare quality or improved health outcomes. Don't waste space here describing descriptive analysis. For programs, present the outcomes of your work or results of the program implementation that you did. Include any data that demonstrates the program's impact. Here you'll add quotes and anecdotes for program implementers or beneficiaries. The real ideal here is to focus on insights that were successful, helpful, surprising, different, or new. Remember also that null or negative findings can be very beneficial to the field. These research findings help research to improve by informing people what strategies did not work. Presenting these findings at a conference may also help you to find someone who has a solution to the problem that you mutually face. Moving on to the discussion and implication or conclusion section of your abstract. Here you'll want to explain why the findings, results, or program insights matter. How can they be helpful to others? What they mean to the field? And why does your work matter? The goal here is to really answer the so what question that your abstract is getting to. Why does your work matter? You may also want to include here a broad conclusion or a forward-looking statement on what it means to present these findings and what your findings addressed, or even what more is needed. It's important for this conclusion to be realistic and flow from your findings. The idea here is to be honest. You don't want to make broad, generalized statements that stretch beyond what data or insights show in your work. Here are just some overall bonus tips and tricks that we found in our own process and that other researchers or program implementers also have. So now that we've moved through those components, first, start early. This ensures that you have enough time to get timely input and feedback from relevant parties. It also helps to engage in several rounds of revision and complete all of your sections before submitting your abstract. You'll want to establish a clear timeline with your co-authors, speakers, and internal reviewers as well. Make sure to do this in advance of the submission deadline so that you have sufficient time for ideation and revision. Second, and this might sound obvious, but it's important to carefully read and follow the submission guidelines. Here, keep in mind that evaluation criteria may differ by session type. You'll also want to be well-versed in the guidelines and what's expected. Not adhering to these guidelines is a common reason for rejection. This could be as simple as going over the word count, so it's important to keep that in mind. Third, if possible, try to find out who the reviewers are and what they research or work on. You can even consider citing or recognizing the reviewer's body of work. Fourth, it's not just your content that matters, but also how it's written. So be sure to write in a very clear, concise, and compelling way. You'll want to be sure that every word counts and that there's a reason for each of those words. You don't have space for any extra jargon or filler here. Fifth, like I mentioned, avoid jargon. Again, we wanted to note that. Keep your language simple and clear. Finally, submit by the deadline. Again, this may sound obvious, but it's important to be sure that you know exactly what time and day the abstracts are due. And ideally, plan to submit a day or two early. I know that we all have that in mind, but really here, try to. The worst case scenario is that you log on and at 11:30 p.m. and find that there's a time-intensive form to fill out or encounter technical difficulties and miss the submission deadline. Here we'll be moving on to an abstract review. This is an interactive portion, and we're excited to have your feedback here. So if I can direct you all to the chat, you'll have an opportunity. Jiratu is going to send a form of successful abstract submissions, and we'll begin by reviewing this one that was submitted by MSSFPO for a health systems research conference. Here, the idea is to really apply the things that we've learned throughout the presentation while reading this abstract. So I'm going to give each of you 5 minutes to individually review this abstract. And again, you can find it a little bit easier than on the slide in the document that Jiratu sent in the chat. Go over that, and in 5 minutes, I will direct you all back here and we'll begin an activity for reviewing a successful abstract. Please let us know if you have any questions too in the chat. Okay, so for these final 20 seconds or so, I'll ask that you rejoin us here in the main conference. Thank you again for taking the time to review the successful abstract. So the idea here is I really want this to be interactive. I know that sometimes when we're on a Zoom call, it's easy to sit back, and I am one of those people often. So I really encourage you that as we go through this to share your opinions, your ideas, as we engage in some of the questions that I'll ask you. One thing that I will ask is that you use the Zoom feature to raise your hand, and I will call on a couple people to respond. At this point, if you just give your name and your answer, that would be very helpful for us to get to know each other. Given the time constraints, I might not have an opportunity to call on many people. So if you'd like to share an additional response in the chat, or if you feel more comfortable doing that, I can read and answer there to the question. So again, please feel free to respond. We're really looking forward to having your participation and hearing what you think. We'll begin today with the title section. So calling back on those ideas that we had mentioned before, what do you think of this title? Is it clear and concise? Does it convey the focus of the research or work? Again, calling back on some of those ideas that we had mentioned previously. Would anyone like to share? And if I don't see your hand, it might be because of Zoom. And give it just a couple more seconds. Yeah, so moving forward, looking at this title, the idea here is, remember, to be catchy and to signal the work that you're doing. We want to do this in a clear and concise way. We see that while this title is long, it packs a lot of detail. We understand that this is a system level issue by the way that they phrase this. It's indicating a wider potential impact and is descriptive enough to go a clear focus or a clearer picture on what the authors are saying. Here we see that the term learning agenda really gives us an idea of the focus or the problem or the solution that this team wants to work on. And this is just in the title. It's important to understand that the conference where you plan to submit your abstract, in this case, MSSFPO, they submitted this to the Global Symposium on the health system research. So in creating your abstract title, it's necessary to, one, grab attention, showing focus on a defined health problem and systems-oriented solution, which is likely to resonate with the reviewers of the conference. And Etta, you are correct. This is a little long. Thank you for sharing that. But it was successful. So we see immediately that it's hinting at this collaborative priority setting, and which involves diverse stakeholders. And again, I would like to note, it is long and risks losing, but we risk losing some of the important context of this. And note that these can look different depending on the type of abstract that you're presenting. And Etta, you said, in terms of abstract length, I think it's really important here, and you'll see that this tends to be a longer abstract in general. However, if the format of the conference that you're submitting to allows you to really take advantage of all of the real estate, so that means if there's words to put, then we encourage that you put them, and if you're able to as well, given the format. Next, we'll move on to the purpose. And so again, if anyone would like to speak, I welcome that. And however, if we're more comfortable in the chat, I'm happy to engage there. But the question here is, does this section state the problem needing to be solved? If so, how do the authors illustrate the purpose of the goal that they're trying to have with their work? And again, if I might not be able to see your hand being raised. So if you want to come off mute, that would be wonderful, or send those answers in the chat. Give us a couple more seconds here. And again, I really welcome anyone to discuss what they see or think. It's important that, throughout the process of many of you will be involved in the abstract writing process, that there's a lot of eyes on the work that we do. And so it's important to be collaborative and note things to your fellow authors as well. All right, I'll go ahead and, oh, yeah, thank you, Mary. The purpose it does sound generic. However, I will note that this was accepted. And so we want to look at how the authors concisely stated that the systematic barriers hinder appropriate surgical care. They're even outlining some of the consequences here too, which provides the reader and the reviewer a richer context when it comes to reading this abstract. And like I mentioned, the goals and objectives, here, they really state the purpose, which is to describe a process designed to yield new learning topics that aim to address those systematic barriers. They're implying that they're identifying specific barriers through research and using new findings to develop those solutions. Let me see if I can open this chat a little bit more. Yeah, oh, that was your comment, Rashma. Yeah, so please, again, feel free to share. We would love to hear. And I'll dive into another question and gives everyone an opportunity to share. Do you, as the reader, you can put on that cap today, do you understand the significance of the work that's being presented? And if so, what is its significance? And I'll encourage, again, if you want to come off mute, that would be wonderful. But I definitely understand that the chat is compelling, and I'm happy to read your answers there. George, a note on the title. Yeah, and so again, this is another hint, which a great point, that if the word count is there, I suggest, and I think many people would suggest, to use the maximum amount of words that you have. So I'll jump into answering, what I see here and how us as the readers, we can see that there is significance in this work. The purpose here is to signal a virtual priority setting process, right, for learning and research. So given the context that we as the reader know from reading this so far, is that we can expect that there's a potential impact of innovative approaches to strengthening surgical care. Thank you for responding, Jiratia, to those questions in the chat. We'll move on to the context section. And I know someone noted that this, is a very lengthy abstract. But so with that being said, there's quite a bit to unpack here. And I'm thankful that we can do this together. So how did the authors illustrate their process of solving this problem? So again, calling back to some of those ideas that we stated in the abstract breakdown section, it's important to note, right, that this content section, is similar to a methods or a results portion of an abstract. So depending on the type of research or program that you're implementing, we see that these different sections can be titled different things. And thank you, Etta, again for sharing. I'll give you all just a second to see if you can see how the authors illustrated the process of solving this problem that we mentioned previously. Again, I think one important thing as we're going through and breaking this down is really to note the language that the authors use and how detailed they can be, right? This, of course, will depend on the conference that you're submitting to. But here in the methods and process section of this content section, you can see that the language is detailed enough for us, the reader, and the reviewer to grasp the basic approaches of their work. We see participatory prioritization, which is indicating a stakeholder engagement. And yeah, Anderson, thank you for pointing that out. We'll send the PowerPoint to you all. Here we have a description of how the topics were developed, right? They're noting surveys, ranking, and refinement. This gives us, the reader and the reviewer, a sense of how this was done, right? The methods. It's an iterative in nature, and it's really using language to state clearly how they're doing this. It's giving us also a clear outcome. So the section ends with a very tangible result. I'll point out the last sentence there, right? 15 learning topics for surgical newborn health and family planning care. So the idea again is to pack in as much detail as you can as you're writing these. I want you all to take special note of the first sentence of the abstract, which says, although surgical MNHFP services are often siloed in different facilities and government departments, the Global Safe Surgery Framework identifies an interdependent resources, skills, and interventions needed to deliver them as well. That's a very packed sentence, and that's something to note, that the authors illustrate how to convey a maximum quantity of information with a maximum economy of word count. You can assume that if someone is seeking an abstract, it's most likely because they're interested in the findings of your study. It's important to provide as much detail as permitted, as I mentioned previously as well. And this, while long, strikes a balance of necessary detail and high-level summarization. Finally, we have the significance portion of this abstract. We want to note that, again, these can look different depending on, one, the conference that you're submitting to, and the type of work that your abstract conveys. So in this case, significance of the work that MSSFPO did. But in your case, this might just be a conclusion section where you go over the results of your study. So I want us to think back to what we spoke about in the conclusion section of our abstract, which the big goal here is to answer the so what question. It's important to note this in your abstract, right? So what? Why was our research important? And here, are there any specific ways that you all see that the authors were able to do this in a clear and concise way? And I have my eyes on the chat now, so I'm happy to read these out as they come. And thank you all again. I know that this is really detailed, and so it takes a lot to look through these abstracts. So everyone, Etta said, it's mentioned that it is a global study, but I'm still to see the mention of what specific low middle income countries, regions it covered, and why those regions were selected. Yeah, you're correct. We get a really broad stroke of that, right? We see that they mention that there's just low middle income participation. How else do we see that they might have conveyed or answered the so what question, which is again so important to concluding your abstract? I'll jump right into the answer. The authors make a case that their virtual process is both a necessity due to COVID and offers a unique framework, making it a potential model for others. They list some clear advantage as well to this, right? That there's a diverse stakeholders, that there was able to have increased participation in low and middle income countries, and also the environmental impact as well. We see that there's cross-sector collaboration that was provided through and able to take place because of this virtual process, which really strikes a note of the innovation of the work that they did. The authors successfully convey that the outcomes of their priority setting process has relevance beyond their own project, specifically inviting other actors in this area to utilize their findings, extending the work's potential impact. They acknowledge that the process was born out of necessity, right? We see that it was virtual due to COVID-19, but they spin these real world limitations in a very honest way to frame that their approach was resource conscious, inclusive, and potentially easier to replicate, right? So again, remembering that the idea here is to be honest. They answer why it matters by directly stating that their work adds to the field. It's not just about the research topic themselves, but also the process that they were able to use. And before we move on to, you said, same for the profile of experts and other persons who participated in this selection reading process. These are not mentioned, perhaps due to word limitation. And yeah, I'm thinking so. So thank you all for participating in that review portion. We want to note that as we're going through here, the introduction or background section is really key to a strong abstract, and distilling some of those elements in a concise way is important. You focus on the need to know of this, remembering that an abstract is a concise summary of your work, and for each section, aiming to capture the essential information a reader needs to understand at the core of your research program or project. The background, right, is really keeping it focused. We want to state the purpose of your work, whether the research or project was innovative. And again, you're presenting this to your peers, and so it's important to present in a way that they can relate to and also use in their own work. For the methods section, you're setting the stage for your work. You should provide a clear picture of how you conducted your research or implemented your program, project, policy. If it's research, briefly describe the study design, survey instrument, noting that sometimes word limitations affect how we can discuss them. It's important to note the population that you studied and briefly outline those key activities or interventions that you implemented. In the results section of your abstract, again, noting that they might look different, for the titles here might look different depending on the type of work that you're doing. May not contain the final data yet for your research activities, but you can use it to build upon anticipation, briefly mentioning key findings that you expect to uncover. And for non-research initiatives, summarize the program, project, or policy outcomes and identify any key lessons learned. Thank you, Rody. In the conclusion and anticipation and impact, right, we're building that for the reviewer and the attendees of the conference, which are your peers. Connecting back to the bigger picture of the field that you work in, explaining the potential significance of your findings in the conference that you're attending. I want to note here that these highlights are meant to guide you in crafting a strong abstract in a concise way. So don't hesitate to refer back to this section for best practices, and even the previous sections that we discussed as well for clarification. Now, as we move on to the next section, I think it'll be important to remember some of these things, and also drawing back to what we saw in this abstract that we went over together. So I'll pass it over to Jaratu.
Thank you, Colby. And I've also shared the writing assignment handout in the chat. So please take a few minutes. Can you please click on the document? And in the next minute, we'll go through the direction for the specific activity. So I'll give you a minute to open the document, and we can all go through it. I think we can get started and go over the objective of this section of the workshop. So the objective of this section is to hone your skills in abstract writing by applying the guidelines that you learned today during this workshop to write an abstract. We have selected a real example of a call for abstract from the upcoming Global Symposium on Health Systems Research, HSR 2024. The example, you have it in the chat, and we're gonna make sure we can review the direction and get you started. So for this specific writing assignment, we want you to be able to tailor the call for abstract to effectively represent your work, research, project, or program or intervention you're currently working on. First thing you want to do is to read the provided example thoroughly. It tends to be very wordy, it has a lot of information, so please take the time to read it and make sure you understand the direction for the specific abstract. It's important to identify the key component and requirements of a strong abstract. So as you go through this handout, look at the requirement, highlight them, make sure you understand what is required for the specific abstract. Review the evaluation criteria on which the abstract will be evaluated. Then you can tailor the example to fit your own research, project, or program intervention. And make sure it aligns with the provided guidelines. For this exercise, you only have 20 minutes, and we know it's a little bit of a short time, but we want you to be able to use your time effectively. So please prioritize key element of the abstract. Include placeholder for any data or information that you can't remember, that you don't have access to right now, just for the sake of saving time. So you can always go back to, when you finish with this workshop, you can always go back to your draft and then supplement the additional information that will be missing. I just want to remind you that a research abstract emphasizes the discovery of new knowledge, while a program intervention abstract showcases the design, implementation, and impact of a targeted initiative. By following this guideline, you can draft a compelling abstract that captures the essence of your research or program and grabs the attention of the conference audience, which today is going to be us. And the goal here is not perfection. It's just to get you started, to start thinking about writing some ideas down that you can always refine later on. And I would like to ask you guys to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you have any questions. If you need more clarification, you can also put those questions in the chat. So Colby has this slide up. While you write, feel free to refer to the highlights of the different components of the abstract, so you are able to remember what are the key components for each section, for the background, for the method, the result, and the conclusion. And again, you have 20 minutes, so good luck. Remember the tips that we discussed earlier. Remember some of the valuable comments that you shared in the chat during Colby's abstract review, and good luck.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining our breakout rooms. I know that it might take a second for us all to get back. We appreciate you opening dialogue and discussing what not only you learned today, but what you wrote during the writing section. I know that can be sometimes intimidating to share with others, so we do appreciate it. As we close today, I'm going to pass to Jaratu.
Thank you, Colby. I apologize. I know we're running out of time. If some of you guys could please could ask.
Oh, you've gone on mute, Jaratu.
Thank you very much, Reshma. One of those technical difficulties you always encounter during a virtual workshop. So I was saying thank you to everyone for participating in the writing assignment. We apologize due to the lack of time if you weren't able to finish working on the draft. But if some of you could probably take a few seconds, a minute to share in the chat or mute yourself and tell us a little bit what you thought of the activity. Are there any tips that you learned today that you feel like will be useful as you guys probably start writing abstracts?
All right, thanks for that. So do share in the chat anything that was a highlight for you or something that you learned that's new. Just to wrap us up, you saw the question previously about filling out the survey. I think Jaratu is going to put the link in the chat for you. So please do let us know what you thought of the workshop. Why we really like to see this feedback is because it helps us improve our offerings to you in the future when we try to do these kinds of workshops. And we'd really love for you to fill this out today before you leave here so that you don't forget. So please do that before you leave. Go ahead to the next slide. So one important thing that I want to share with you is that the MKA team is sort of here to offer one-on-one support if that's helpful for you. We can give you feedback on an early draft of an abstract. So for example, if you'd like to complete the practice exercise that you were doing today and send that to us, we can give you constructive feedback on that. We can also support you in the future, let's say for a real abstract submission. We know that your awards also have staff available to support you and you have internal deadlines. But if you'd like to send us something, let's say very early in your process, so that you can get our feedback before it's now time for you to submit for your own internal deadlines, we're also happy to do that. And we can share that feedback within 7 business days. So we will be getting these slides and you can send it to the address listed on the slide here. And I also realized, we didn't have enough time in the breakout rooms and people had questions and things that they wanted to discuss. If you really would feel like you'd benefit from having a one-on-one discussion or having a small group discussion, kind of like we wanted to have there, go ahead and email that same email address and request that. That's an offering that we can probably make happen as well. Because sometimes it's nice to talk through your specific questions with somebody. So please do contact us if you'd like support in any of those ways. And then finally, just want to remind you about the various resources that are available to you. So we will be creating a hub resource posting where we'll have all of this information for you. So you'll have these slides. We also want to let you know that, we did draw from some existing tips and guidance on abstracts, and you can see the various links here for the original sources for some of those. And then on the next slide, you'll see when you do get the good news that your abstract has been accepted and you've been selected to present at a conference, you'll want to come and take a look at our previous training materials on creating a compelling presentation. And that is available in both English and in French. And there's a shorter presentation also available called "Does Your Communication Pass the So What Test?" You might remember that answering "so what," why does this matter, why is this important, is a really key aspect of an abstract. And so that's also a good presentation that can give you a reminder of that. So please do come and access those resources when the time is right for you. And again, please do fill out the survey before you leave. And importantly, do email us and let us know what kind of one-on-one support we can provide you, whether that is constructive feedback on a draft abstract or whether you'd like to talk through any particular questions or issues. So we thank you for joining, and we apologize that some of the sessions were a bit shorter than we had planned, but hopefully it was still very useful to you. So thanks to Jaratu and Colby for co-facilitating this session, and thanks to all of you for coming and engaging and participating. We really appreciate it. So thank you.